Good evening, beautiful woman. Welcome to Isaya's Inspiring Evenings, a podcast full of goddess series, witches' secrets, colors of women and fairy seasons to integrate serenity, abundance, joy, and magic into your life. I am Isaya Bell, creatrix, magical pragmatic inspiration mentor, tech goddess teacher, and traveling priestess. And this podcast aims to accompany you for peaceful and inspiring evenings. Isaya's Inspiring Evenings has had various iterations and styles and is published irregularly. Subscribe to the podcast on the platform of your choice to be informed of the publication of each new episode. If you like this podcast, please support it by leaving stars, blue thumbs, and reviews on whatever platform you listen to me. In 2024, there are going to be 5 series in it. For now, all different, all aiming to inspire the audience, all telling stories, each complementing each other. One series titled Women Lighting the Way is about women's stories, centering around the past or future speakers from the various Women Lighting the Way summits, adding to the virtual library of women's stories and providing a much-needed counterpoint to the many men's stories going around in our world of patriarchy. This is one of those episodes, and I am happy to invite you to listen to the story of Katische Haberfield, recorded in 2022 and titled Crossing Over Lost Souls, How Ghosts Changed My Life for the Better. Enjoy!
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Women Lighting the Way Summit. I hope you've been enjoying the other fabulous presentations. Today I'm here to talk to you about my journey. Now, an earthbound spirit is a human being who has died, but who has not crossed over into the afterlife. Basically, what happens is when you die, the spirit leaves your mouth and it gets crossed over so that it can then receive healing, have a life review, take some more lessons, and then incarnate again. It's what's known as reincarnation. Reincarnation is a fact, not a religious belief. Anyway, in the past 12 months, I have gone on a very interesting journey whereby I have learned by necessity and now by privilege and honor to cross over earthbound spirits. I have also learned how to detect if there is somebody that is an earthbound spirit that is attached to a person. So you need to just understand 2 concepts for my presentation today. Earthbound spirits that are not attached. So they're the ones that we call ghosts. They're just in the astral realm. And then we have attached spirits who need releasement and crossing over, who are attached to a physical person who is alive. So I have skills in being able to sense this and then do something about it. So my journey with understanding that I actually could do this happened when I realized I had a spirit attachment. But today I wanted to focus on the ghost part because I know that's what you're all here for, the ghost part. When I started doing past life regression therapy, I was sitting in my lounge room one day and the cat jumped up on a specific shelf and started meowing. And the cat had never sat on that shelf before insistently, and I instantly sensed new energy in the house. Now, I have clairvoyance, but I can't see ghosts at the moment because it requires the ghost or the earthbound spirit to lower their vibration, and you must raise your vibration for them to be able to see you and you see them. So I can sense them with my spidey senses. I know they're there by their energy. The cat goes hyperactive and lets me know that they're here. And if I ignore them, the cat will come bite my feet or jump on my laptop or do something crazy. But when this very first spirit came into my house, this spirit was the uncrossed over soul, a portion of the soul of one of my clients. The first day that the spirits came into my house, I had just finished a couple of past life regressions. And so I knew very clearly that this was who these people were because I could sense them. And I also asked them who they were. At the very beginning of my journey, the only way that I knew how to communicate with spirits, both earthbound and spirit guides, was through my pendulum. I had a pendulum book, and in my pendulum book, I created these wheels which had numbers and letters. And I began the long, laborious process of writing down messages from spirits using the pendulum. Trust me, it's a difficult way to do it. It's much easier to use mental telepathy and all of your senses, but that's how we got started. And so I crossed over these spirits, and then I let their present life self know that I had crossed them over. Back in those days, it was quite time demanding. I used to create PowerPoint presentation videos with imagery and photos of the present life persona, the past life persona, and used what's called the crossing over prayer. Now, the crossing over prayer is a prayer designed by a friend of mine, Tina Irwin. And when the spirits came into my house, I had Googled how to cross over ghosts and came across her book, her podcast, and her prayer. But I began to print out copies of this prayer called the crossing over prayer and have it everywhere in my house. My children were not at home at the time, so it didn't matter. I had this prayer stuck up everywhere and framed. And what I had to do was say this prayer, and I would feel and know when the earthbound spirit had crossed into heaven. I would get a sign, and I would ask my main spirit guide, who's Archangel Michael, had they crossed, and he would give me the indication. You can train your pendulum to say yes, no, maybe. I felt really honoured that I had done that, and my clients were able to receive those parts of their soul as spirit guides. I know that because they were able to connect with them. From then on, I started to get messages that I needed to do some spirit crossing over. I live opposite a hospital. I purchased a house opposite a hospital, not knowing or even thinking about the fact that a hospital is a source of a lot of souls who have died, emergency rooms, and some of them may not cross over. On sundown, Max would go berserk. He never liked the curtains being open at sundown. And he began to become really insistent about the curtains being closed right on 5 p.m. But what started happening is that the earthbound spirits started entering my house, and the energy was just really dense and thick because it was frenetic. It was like somebody had put a neon billboard outside my house which said, "This woman knows how to get you to heaven." And literally all day, every day, for a good couple of days leading into weeks, I would cross over spirits. There were so many flooding through my house that I didn't have time to find out who they were or what they were looking for. They just wanted to cross over. A couple of them, I actually captured the sound of them talking as they were being crossed over. At this time, I was watching a lot of the Channeling Eric on YouTube. And this channel uses a medium and a spirit who's on the other side, who was a boy named Eric, to channel deceased people to learn their stories about their lives. And so I had her on the podcast episode, and Eric showed up into that podcast episode and left us an audio message. I'm going to share this audio message with you. So here's the first audio.
Yeah, he makes me laugh, and I think
Yeah, he's
everybody,
funny.
very funny character.
Yeah.
Did you catch it? He goes, "Eric, I'll play it again."
Yeah.
One more time.
Yeah.
It's Eric.
Yeah.
Okay. So I knew from that podcast episode, undoubtedly, that you could actually capture the sound of spirits by the audio waves, by the sound waves. So my mind was blown there. So that I knew that I wasn't making up what I heard or sensed when I was communicating with the spirits. I knew that there would be a way that I could transition to learning to hear them myself. But I was fascinated by the fact that I could catch them on audio as well. This is a question where I have a spirit here. It's a guy and he wants to cross over and he's from Dublin. Yeah. Okay, also find another one.
Living, just stop.
I like that one. Claude Henry, just stop.
Living, just stop. Living, just stop.
He's just annoyed with the other people because there's a queue of people trying to cross over. That's my brother. So that they did try and talk to me in the process of crossing.
Little Haberfield. Little Haberfield. Little Haberfield.
Wilhoff has it.
Little Haberfield.
See there, you can hear the discussions going on in the background. These are just little tiny snippets. Here's another one. All right.
This is stuff for children. This is stuff for children. This is stuff for children.
This one's where the spirit is talking when I'm asking how many children he had. He's talking about his precious dust-filled children because they've died now. This is where it all started from. So all the spirits start entering the house. So that's the very beginning of learning that I could communicate with spirits. I was then like, God, okay, I'm happy to do this, but not 24/7. You need to stop this. I had the crossing over prayer. I recorded myself playing the audio of the crossing over prayer, and I said it whenever I felt the energy. But it was really an ineffective way of doing things. So I was like, okay, dude, sorry, God, I called dude. All right, God, I'm really happy to cross over spirits, but not in my house. Let's create a firm boundary. And when I did some work in Life Between Lives with Cindy Porter, I got an energetic upgrade and I was told that they would come in no more. So this was all happy and things went back to normal, and the only visitors in the house were my spirit guides. Then I was on Facebook one day. It sent me in my newsfeed a video of a radio clip session with my local radio station where people were invited to dial in and talk about ghosts. And so I watched the video and I got full body chills knowing that I needed to go to the cemetery to find this little boy. So this is Robin Bailey, who's in our local radio station.
Kids can see ghosts.
We used to visit a family member in the Bulimba Cemetery. And when my daughter was about 2.5, she used to go down about 3 grades away and just talk and play, and we thought nothing of it. And we'd visit often, and on one of the visits, she turned around as we were putting in the car and waved. We said, "Who are you waving to?" And she said, "Oh, just a little boy. He used to be sick, but he's not anymore. He's just waiting for his mum." And we're like, okay, in the car.
Yeah.
And then the time passed, and over time she just stopped talking and playing. She'd just come and sit with us. And then a few years later, when my son was about 3, he came up to my daughter when we were cleaning up the grave and said, "The little boy wants to know why you won't talk to him anymore."
Okay. That'll freak me out.
Okay, so I saw that and I'm like, well, I live not very far away from that cemetery. And I went to the cemetery and I crossed him over. Now, I composed a whole video, which is a 10-minute video, showing you the process of crossing Harry over, and it was a very emotional situation for me. So I wandered around the graveyard until I came across what seemed to be one of two gravestones that matched the description of a little boy of the right kind of age. And then I was like, it's getting hot and I'm tired, and I'm going to just stand here in the shade and think about this. And this is when I felt the unmistakable sensation of a hand on my thigh, and then the unmistakable sensation of a child jumping up piggyback style onto my shoulders. And I knew that I had him, and I started talking to him. Not out loud. I don't want to make people think that I'm a weirdo in a cemetery. I talked to him in my mind, telepathically telling him about the fact that he died, that he needed to go to heaven, all the reasons why he needed to go to heaven, and then I told him that his mama was waiting for him. And I was like, I'm sending a team of angels in, and they're going to be here soon. When I went to the cemetery, it was a perfect blue sky with not a cloud in the sky. As Harry and I were standing there, up rose over the hilltop the most spectacular cloud formation I've ever seen in my life, in the shape of an angel. I'll show you the image. Okay. And what happened was this image began to come closer and closer to us, and I started crying, and it started swirling around in a vortex. And when the vortex went over the top of where Harry's actual grave was, when Harry crossed over. And you can see at the lower section of the screen, there's two smaller angels. And in the video that I have prepared that you can find on my blog, you can see how I visually saw both Harry and his mother in the clouds as they reunited. If you wish to learn more about Harry's journey, this is my website here. And if you go to blog, you can see Earthbound Spirit Ghosts, and you'll come up with a number of blogs that I've written on the topic. You can watch me cross over Dennis, the full video. You can see the radio podcast episode, and you can see the photo of Harry and his mama in the sky. And you can also listen to me communicating with Harry after he's crossed over, and the full video of me crossing over Harry in the cemetery. But this is not the story that I really want to tell you about today. I wanted to tell you about what's happened since Harry. After Harry, I contacted the radio station, and the radio station did a segment which they recorded on their podcast about, was this really Harry? What did you see in the clouds? What did people think they saw in the clouds? And it was quite funny. It was very lighthearted. And I was like, I'm going to prove to them that I crossed over Harry. And so I hired a medium, Megan Jones, to communicate with Harry. And Harry came through, and he validated everything that I experienced. And he validated how he crossed over. And then he told us through the medium about his family and his lifetime. And that was just fabulous. I was so excited. But the really interesting part is at the very end, just before we finished, Harry said, "Bye, Megan. Thank you for saving me a second time." And I was like, I'm sorry? He said, "Thank you for saving me a second time." And I was like, "Do you mean I already know you?" He said, "Yes, we have met before." So it's like, okay, I need to find out this. So I put that on the back burner as must figure out how I know Harry in a past life. And he said to me also that there was one more spirit that I needed to cross over in the Balmoral Cemetery. And I was like, okay, I'll go back and find him. And Harry said, this guy has been around for a long time. He said, I never spoke to him, and it might take you a while to cross him over. And I knew nothing other than there was a deed. different people, different mediums have different abilities, and names is something that Megan is still trying to learn to come through. So I've walked around the cemetery until I found the grave that felt the right energy. And I started talking to the spirit, and the D came in the middle name. His name was Dennis, James Dennis White. And I was telling him how I'd done the radio segment and Harry was already here, and I was worried about him being in the cemetery when all the ghost hunters would come back. And he wasn't really ready to cross over, but he trusted me. And I felt this oosh in my heart, and I knew that he had detached to myself. So I went home, and luckily I had a client session with a friend. And at the very beginning of the session, I said to her, "You need to cross Dennis over because I think he's attached to my heart." So I wanted to share with you Dennis crossing over. So all you have to do, Dennis, is to grab her hand and they will take you up into the heavens. So Godspeed, we love you, and enjoy the uniting time with your daughter.
God bless, Dennis.
Okay, he's gone.
Take a few really deep breaths, Katische, just to let go of that jewel. There you go.
That was a big draw.
Ooh.
So that's how Dennis crossed over. So he attached to me and then he crossed over. It's very physically demanding work. It does impact my body. After that, Harry became my guide, and he would come in and alert me when there were people to cross over. So Harry's sign for me is he comes across the back of my neck, and basically I find out which cemetery, and I have this folder here, and I download the cemetery maps, and I work out with my pendulum which plot, if it's not one of Harry's family members. I've actually been and crossed over quite a number of extended people in Harry's family. I've got a very interesting, sad story with a lot of children and early deaths. And some of the things that actually do correlate with actual records of death. So, for example, and I'm trying to be private here because these are real people with real families that probably still exist. But Harry sent me to cross over some children who were in the Hemet Cemetery in Brisbane. And I had asked him questions about these children. These were his siblings, but they were not in the same cemetery as him. So there were two small children there. I knew I had to go to this cemetery, and I had the names of the individuals who needed to be crossed. One little boy was named Gordon, and the other was called David. And the difficult thing about Harry's extended family is that Harry's the only one that has a name and a grave. The rest are all just cemetery records, and you have to go find them. And if they are buried in an unmarked grave, it's particularly difficult to find the unmarked grave. You have to understand the numbering system and basically step it out. So I look on the cemetery records to find if they are buried in this location, and then I mark down the number of the graves and I step it out and find them. So you can see in this one here, this is the unmarked grave of Gordon and David. Now, what was interesting about this, I get a distinct impression at the time that they're crossing over of their story. Sometimes I can feel them hold my hand. Other times it's just the memory. And these two little children met their ends untimely. So one of the little children had a pillow smothered on their face because they were born with the cleft palate. And in the 1930s, that would have been a big thing. The second one that was buried with him, I actually have the death record here. And the impression that I got at the time of visiting the cemetery, but not having checked the death record, is that he had been fed some kind of a medicine that contributed to his death. I had the feeling of sadness. I had the feeling that this one wasn't a purposeful death. It was known at the time that this medicine would help, but it actually contributed towards the death. And when I finished crossing these babies over and returned home to research these babies, I came across the death certificate. And at that time, arsenic was an ingredient in many medicines. And this child, it has on the death certificate, on her privacy, or the cause of death: gastroenteritis, born of a baby, toxemia, and coma. So the toxemia was the arsenic. And so this baby is now in heaven, thanks to his brother, Harry. Harry always shows me with our children. I've been to the Mount Gravatt Cemetery, where, out of respect, because I think these people are living, I won't say who they are, their parents are living. It's a brother and his unborn 22-week-old fetus brother. So the brother, he died very early, at the age 19, in a car crash. And I knew that he would be waiting for me at the toilet block. And so when we arrived at the cemetery, we went to the toilet block and I immediately felt him hold my hand. And we found him and crossed him over. And with him in his grave was a little baby boy that was a 22-week-old fetus. And the reason why he was buried with them and there was no plaque was that his parents got into a fight when the mum was pregnant and he kicked her belly and the baby was lost. But because it was 22 weeks, the baby was buried. So these are the impressions that I get when I'm actually there at the time crossing over. I have also been to the Plough Inn, which is an interesting story. The Plough Inn is a famous hotel in Brisbane. It was restored in Expo 88 in 1988. Now, when you look here, I'm standing at ground level. In one of the floods, there were a number of floods, lots of floods in Brisbane, but in one of the floods in 1890, the water went all the way up to that balcony that you can see there. And the publican had a daughter who was 16 at the time, Selena Mary Brown, and she was bringing all the furniture up to this area here. And she drowned. Now, there are legends about this. You can research her on public record, but one suggestion is that she swam in the floodwaters, that it was hot, and there was an accident. She was mucking around with another publican, and he pulled her under, and therefore it was a big surprise, and she drowned. So I knew that she would be there. I was told that she would be here on the stairways. But I basically went into the pub, looked around. And then I sat on this table here. It was 10 o'clock in the morning, so there's no one in the pub. It's by myself. And I waited for the presence of the spirits to be known. This is behind the pub, and this is the area where she would have gone for a swim that was flooded. Obviously, it didn't look like that back then. And I had I think it was 3 or 4 spirits come to me for crossing over. They're all very hesitant. But each of them required talking to and convincing that it was time for them to go, because they each stayed behind for a reason. For example, if we have a look here, you can see here, this is what we call the South Bank Pool and Beach. It's a free public area, and just beyond that is the Brisbane River. And given that not long after she died, there was another flood, and there was a flood in 1975, and then there's a flood in 2021, and then there's a flood in 2022. She's very aware, because the ghosts stay in the location, that this area floods. And she was very worried about other people drowning. And these are the messages of why people stay behind. And I said to her, the thing that convinced her to cross over was, I said to her to look over to the right-hand side. And I said to her, can you see those big, high, tall things there? They're called lifeguards. And their whole job is to protect people, to make sure people don't drown. And instantaneously, honestly, if I could catch the CCTV footage from this hotel, you would see my body do the whole spirit thing again. So she just needed that knowledge that she didn't need to be there on watch, and she released and went away. I had a publican who went without even talking to me, and I had quite a ghastly vision of a woman coming out, and she had a knife stabbed in her neck. She crossed over. It was like a steak knife. She was the one, she had been murdered by her husband, the publican, and she waited for him to go. She didn't want to have anything to do with him. A lot of the time they want to know, do I have to be near them when I cross over? And the answer is no. The other famous one, person that I crossed over this day, her name was Miriam, and she didn't belong with the pub, so to speak. She wasn't found at the time of her death at the pub, but it was a ghastly story. And when I crossed her over, I said to her, you're not part of the pub, but why are you here? And she said, I was hurt after drinking at the pub, and I stayed behind because I want to make sure that other women don't get raped and murdered and hurt like I was. And so I had to point to her to all the security cameras that are in South Bank, and showed her that even in the pub, I pointed to right where I was, that there are security cameras now to protect the safety of punters and women, and at nighttime people are watched over. And she crossed over. The reason why she haunted this pub was she had been there earlier that day. She was a drunkard. She was a woman who had a husband who was in the Boggo Road jail, a local jail, a very notorious jail. And she was left on the streets to defend herself without a husband. She became a vagrant. She became drunk all the time, possibly a prostitute. And she was in the pub at the morning of her death. And she was kicked out twice. And the second time, she went and slept in an empty building nearby. She met an untimely and very grisly death in that building. And her spirit doesn't remember being in that building and being attacked, because the last memory she had was being in the pub, physically drinking in the pub. So that's why she haunted the pub as well. So you can go and Google and search these particular individuals, and there's even books written about them. I'm not shy of saying that I will help anywhere that I find evidence that there are earthbound spirits. I will go and cross them over, or I'll go and find out if it's myth or they're actually there, and I can energetically feel, sense, and communicate with them. So they've all crossed over. I wanted also to share with you a couple of other ones. So this is the Memorial Plaque for James Kirk Muir, who died on... He fell off a horse and buggy on Christmas Day, and it took him a whole day to die. So I was alerted to this beautiful location in Harrisfield by a former schoolmate whose children can see, literally, they're only little, so they can literally see the dead. And she said, my children, we were out here doing a farm gate tour, and my children said, Mummy, there is a child here, and she's very scared. She saw it as a she, very scared, and I don't know how to cross her over in the small children's world. And she contacted me and said, maybe you can help. And so I went out there, and she said, you're going to find it straight away. There's a grave, and it's got lots of windmills on it, and the child is there. And so I went there. I could see the energy. I walked around the entire cemetery, and I was like, this is him. It's a boy. I'm sorry, it's not a girl, it's a boy. I'm going to cross this one over who's over there hanging out by the pretty grave. Now you're here because of all the pinwheels are starting to go. For me, hey darling. When I saw the spirit, they flashed an image in my mind of what they looked like. And to me, it was very clear. This was a very pretty looking child who had long-ish, when parents decide not to cut their boys' hair, they let it grow long, like pure white, long blonde hair. And then I went on the internet to do some research, as you do, and stumbled across this video. So this is...
This is the memorial for James Kirk Muir, who was just 3 years old when he died on the 26th of December 1912. James was involved in a horse and cart accident on Christmas Day. As the horse and buggy were travelling on the Normanby Road in Harrisville, the horses freaked, causing the buggy to overturn. Young James suffered a fracture at the base of his skull. He died 10 hours later. James was born in Hellenborough in Scotland on the 28th of September 1909. His parents were Isabella Wiley and James Muir. James Sr. was a clergyman in the Presbyterian Church in the local area. The family had made a couple of journeys to and from Scotland. However, James Sr. first arrived in Australia in 1903 and married Isabella in Queensland in 1905. The pair's first child, Andrew, was born a year later in Cairns. In April 1909, the family left Australia, returning to Scotland, which is where James Jr. was born. James's cause of death certificate indicates that the fracture to the skull was what caused his death. This certificate also says that he was buried in the Harrisville Cemetery on the 27th of December. However, cemetery records of the Lutwich Cemetery indicate that he was buried with his mother when she passed in 1925. I am assuming that James Jr. was cremated in Harrisville before being buried with his mother. This was common practice when parents outlived their children. Isabella died in 1925 of tuberculosis, exhaustion, and heart failure. She was 54 years old. James Sr. went on to remarry later on in his life. In 1935, he married Gladys Morrison in Brisbane. The pair were married for 10 years before James himself passed away. He was 71 years of age. The memorial for James Jr. still exists at the Harrisville Cemetery to commemorate a young boy lost in such tragic circumstances.
He looks exactly like what I saw in my mind when I was at the cemetery. And please trust me that I did not know any of those details about him other than my friend said, go to the cemetery, there's a child there. It's a girl, but as you can tell, you saw the baby. He was 2 years older than that animated version, so he would have had longer hair, blonde hair, really pretty child. And so I crossed that little baby over, a little toddler 3-year-old, who's now resting in peace. Why did his soul not go? Why did his spirit not go with his mother, even though his ashes were moved from that cemetery to the Lutwich Cemetery? And the answer is, when you're an earthbound spirit, you are trapped in the location of your death or where you think your body is at the time of death, or the building or the house. You're in such a fog you can't see anything around it. They stay in the location. So that's why his spirit was still there at his original gravesite and not with his mother. So he's crossed over now. So what has the transformation been for me? One, in the last 12 months, since the last Women Lighting the Way Summit, I have learned that I had an attached spirit. I've had that attached spirit crossed over. And since then, I have learned how to perceive attached spirits on people. I've learned how to cross over those that are located as earthbound spirits that are not attached. What has happened for me? I've had a massive understanding of the value of life, of the value of understanding and respecting the sanctity of death and the sanctity of what we call ghosts. The only way that is ethical to deal with the concept of ghosts is to not do anything to harm them, to agitate them, and to learn to cross them over. You can ask somebody like myself, or you can try yourself to go and get a copy of the crossing over prayer. And when you come across crossover, if you can't do it, ask for Archangel Ariel, Zadkiel, and Azrael. They will help cross over the spirit. And most of all, most importantly, treat that earthbound spirit as though they were your own child, with care and compassion and mercy. They deserve respect. They were a human being once. So just imagine if one of your loved ones died, got a shock, and didn't cross over. You would not want people taunting their grave, taunting them, trying to communicate with them, trying to prove that they're there. You would simply want them to help your child take passage to the afterlife. So please, stop supporting ghost hunting. Stop going on ghost hunting tours. If you must, be respectful. Don't participate in these tours. Go to that cemetery at a separate time with pure of intention and pure of heart, with great compassion, love and mercy. And then you'll be able to use your psychic skills to identify, communicate with, and cross them over. If you don't have mediumship skills or psychic skills, and you know of a location where there is a ghost, then send me a message on Facebook and I'll do it. I can remote cross them over or I can go physically. But please honor this. This is a soul. This is a human being who needs to get healing, who needs to be reunited with their loved ones, and who most of all deserves respect, mercy, and compassion. So I am eternally grateful for the fact that this is the lifetime in which I have been given the honor and the privilege to be able to help souls cross over, whether they be attached or in the astral realm. I do get very exhausted doing this work, but it is a huge privilege and a huge honor. It's now incorporated into my everyday work. So if you come and have a past life regression and I sense there's someone in your lifetime that we're visiting that hasn't crossed over, I will stop the session and we will cross that spirit over. And if I sense in that session that you have an attached entity, I will release the spirit there and then in the session. So it is my honor to be of assistance in this earthly lifetime, helping people understand that you are an eternal being. Your mind stream is eternal and you do go on. You don't need to quest for eternal life. You are given eternal life through your eternal mind stream. You come over and over again. I'm here in this lifetime to help people understand there's nothing to be afraid of with death because you go on. And to help people understand that all forms of energy need to be respected, should be respected, and to ask you to give mercy and compassion to those who are not as fortunate and need to be crossed over.
That's it for this episode. The next one is still in creation. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, if you want to support this podcast, share, subscribe, and leave stars, blue thumbs, and a review on whichever platform you listen to. If you want to be accompanied in the change processes that life offers you, if you want to live a goddess life daily and participate in the awakening of feminine energy in the world, know the secrets of witches, and apply the rituals of fairies in your daily life, contact me on my website isayabelle.com. You can also subscribe to my newsletter to be informed of all the news in the real and virtual world of Isaya. You will of course find this podcast on all platforms, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, etc., but also on YouTube and on my website isayabelle.com on the podcast page